Disappointed obviously that the season comes to an end, especially the way it did.
Trouble down in Texas as the men let an early lead slip away to end their postseason dreams.
While the women's season comes to an end in a very familiar way to a very familiar opponent.
I'm Brielle Batchelor, live from the Leocore Center. Later on in the show, I will discuss how the Temple women's basketball team had a surprising turn of events in that AAC semifinal game.
I'm Xavier Adams, live at the studio set. I'll tackle the overall men's side, where Memphis played like a true #1 seed on its way to the conference title game. I'll also take a look at some standout players from the AAC Tournament. Our final Courts in Session for 2025 is live, and it starts right now.
Welcome back to another episode of Courts in Session. March is well underway and college ball is thriving, but neither Temple team is joining the party after early exits from the AAC Tournament. I'm Gabriel Linington.
And I'm Pat Dallahan. Both the men's and the women's AAC tournaments have wrapped up, but not with the results they desired. We'll start with the men down in Texas. The men started their AAC tournament campaign last Thursday against a familiar foe, Tulsa, but without Jamal Mashburn and Quante Berry, both injured. But the game must go on. This was their second matchup in 9 days. The Owls won that game in Oklahoma, but this time around, both of their seasons were on the line. Loser goes home in Fort Worth. In the first half, the ball was moving for the Owls offense as they recorded 8 dimes alone in the first frame, the second of which came on this Matteo Piccarelli 3. Tulsa down 5, the Golden Hurricane offense scrambling, balls all over the place. Tulsa's leading scorer on the night, Jared Garcia, flies down the lane for the vicious one-handed slam. Early in the second, the Owls lead by 8 after holding a 12-point lead at half. Shane Dezzoni decides he wants to stop the slide on this beautiful up-and-under layup. Remember the 12-point lead? Well, it's down to 2, and it won't last much longer as Garcia gives Tulsa the lead with the 3. Under 2 minutes to play, Tulsa up 1. Dewan Odom dumps it down low to Justin Amati. Some terrific footwork from Amati boosts the Tulsa lead to 3. But next possession, Temple needs a score. Zion Stanford delivers, but it was too little too late. Temple's season comes to an end in the American Conference Tournament second round, 75-71. This is the 5th time in 6 years that the Owls have lost their first AAC postseason tournament game. Tulsa's offense came from an unexpected source, Jared Garcia. Garcia averaged about 10 points per game this season, but exploded for a team-high 20 points on 7 of 10 shooting. Steve Settle ended his collegiate career with a game-high 22 points, 6 boards, 3 steals, and 2 assists, despite the loss of very impressive performance to close out his time on Broad. But in the end, the Owls just didn't make shots. They were 67% from the foul line and just 38% from the floor. Temple ends the season at 7-15.
I think we played hard and physical. Look, it's something we've done all season long, right? We missed 11 free throws. I think we're top 5 in the country in getting to the foul line. So we had to, we did what we wanted. We just had to make the ones when we got there. And you're not going to make all 35, but you hope to make a little bit better percentage. And then defensively for us, again, we had to manage some fouls. But again, great credit to them. They were the tougher team in that second half.
In the back, on the right, James Irving.
Temple, as the higher seed, came into this game as the favourites. However, the Owls had some injuries throughout the regular season. They bled into the postseason, thus making any tournament run a long shot. Jamal Mashburn Jr. had been dominant up until early February when he went down. You can't replace an offensive monster like Mashburn, averaging 22, especially in March. Then his fellow guard, a fan favorite, Quante Berry, came down with a finger injury and was sidelined against Tulsa. Overall, the Owls had just 9 scholarship players on the roster. It's a problem they were never able to recover from.
Here's how the men's bracket shaped up. On the right side, Temple's run ended almost as soon as it started with the loss to Tulsa, whose own run fell short against North Texas. The Mean Green met UAB in the semifinals and ultimately fell to the Blazers.
Then on the other side, the semifinal matchup, Memphis against the Tulane Green Wave, a 1-point game, 78-77, getting Memphis to the finals against the UAB Blazers. Ultimately, the top-seeded Tigers offense was too strong for the third-seeded Blazers, thus giving the title an automatic trip to the dance to the Tigers.
For more on the championship game, Courts in Session's very own Xavier Adams is at the studio set to break down Memphis's automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. Hey, Xavier.
Thanks, guys. It was a back-and-forth matchup as expected by the two powerhouse conference teams. UAB stuck around and kept the game interesting until the second half, when Memphis's depth proved to be too much. A showdown in Fort Worth, Texas at the Dickies Arena featuring 2 of the top 3 AAC teams. Jumping straight to the second half, UAB up on Memphis by 1. A snatch loose pass by Memphis ends up with Colby Rogers, who knocks down the corner 3 to put Memphis up. Later in the half, UAB down by 5. A much-needed 3 is hit by Tony. Shortly after, Memphis's PJ Haggerty leads a fast break, gets down on the court and fouled for the tough and one bucket. The final few minutes of the game, Butta Johnson for UAB will hit a 3, but at this point, the Tigers have already ran away with the conference title. Final score, 84-72. For this game, the 2 players that stood out most were UAB's Yaxel Lendeborg and, to no one's surprise, Memphis's Dane Danger. Danger for the Tigers dropped another double-double with 22 points and 12 boards. Lendeborg for the Dragons had 19 points and 17 rebounds and tried his best to keep the Dragons around, but it wasn't enough to get it done against the Tigers, who are now going dancing. That's all for the American Championship down in Fort Worth. As March Madness begins, we'll be sure to keep an eye on Memphis's Dane Danger and how the rest of that team performs throughout the tournament. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, Xavier. And obviously, Memphis are just above the rest in the AAC.
Right.
Nobody can really compete with them. But let's talk about the Temple game. For everyone, it was just frustrating. You saw how Temple came into the game. They were blazing from 3, shooting over 40%. And Tulsa seemed to just take their powers out of the locker room. Temple lost all momentum and Tulsa really got back into the game.
Yeah, it was almost an out-of-body experience, as people that have watched the Temple team all year long in the first half. The ball was moving like crazy, 8 assists in the first half. But when you look at it heading into that game, you talked about it in the injury report, Gabriel. They only had 9 scholarship players available coming into the game on Thursday and only had 8 after Mo Keita went down. So the odds were stacked against them coming into this game regardless. Had they won this game, they would have been matched up with 2-seed North Texas, and if they were able to win that, 3-seed UAB, who's regarded as arguably the best team in the conference in the regular season and the second best team in the tournament. So the odds weren't in their favor, but at the same time, it's still incredibly disappointing to see the season come to an end the way it did.
Well, you're talking about being shorthanded. The bench points discrepancy was 35-19. So for now, the Owls' future is ambiguous. Are they going to go down the rebuild route or looking to contend in the near future as they head into Fisher's 3rd season? The Owls have some big contributors leaving the nest this spring semester. The Owls have 4 graduating seniors. We talked about him. After transferring, Mashburn Jr. has certainly had one of the best senior send-off seasons until his injury. Then Steve Settle III, he is a backbone to this squad. At 6'10", shooting nearly 40% from 3. Next up, Shane Dezonia, weekly feature in our top plays and making sure the other team watches their heads. And finally, Matteo Piccarelli, the Italian stallion, a Courts in Session crew favorite, will be moving on.
The men's team had 2 honorees in the AAC postseason awards. Aiden Tobias's strong first campaign led to his placement on the league's all-freshman team. Although he was at one point the nation's second leading scorer, Jamal Mashburn was absent from the first team. The grad transfer was named to the AAC's second team, but he would have been a first-team lock had he stayed healthy.
That's our coverage on the men's side for now. When we are back, it's time to move to the women.
Courts in Session beat reporter Brielle Batchelor is live at the Liacouras Center to take a deep dive on the women's run, even though the run wasn't very deep.
Yes, Pat, when we come back from break, I will discuss how the women lost to Rice in their semifinal game for the second year in a row. Courts in Session is coming right back.
Anticipation is the word thanks to some deja vu. Last year, it was the Temple Owls versus the Rice Owls in the AAC semi-finals with an eventual Rice win. This year, same story, Owls versus Owls in the semi-finals of the AAC Tournament with Temple trying to write some history. Temple is back in the Dickies Arena for their second game of the tournament. Temple up 10-5, but Rice starts to get it going by closing out the quarter with a 7-0 run. Into the second, down 6, Temple is struggling, but Tariona Gary drives down the baseline. Contact and a tough shot brings them within 4. Third quarter, and this is where Rice starts to pull away as Anaya Alexis gets the sweet float to go. Now Temple down 12, the Owls are getting back to doing what they do best. Defense to offense, a steal into a fast break as Kayla Turner gets the 2-point J. 12-point game and Rice feels like extending that as Malia Fisher gets it to go with a trip to the line on the side. And again, we get to see some pickpocketing as Tristan Taylor moves downhill for the last bit of scoring Temple will see in the quarter. Then here we go, a Fisher bucket for 3 of her 18. Rice takes this game in dominant fashion, 67-49. The sequel was worse than the original. Temple failed to score from downtown, 0 for 8 from 3. This was the first time since 2021 that the Temple Owls failed to record a 3-pointer in a game. And it didn't stop there. Temple also only had 5 assists, the team's lowest total since 2014. Temple was on the wrong end of statistical history as they fall to Rice in the semis in back-to-back years.
It was a disappointing loss. Obviously, we wanted to win. Rice played a tough game, lots of pressure. And we came out on the bottom side of it today. I just wish that for my kids that we could have pulled this off. I mean, we're losing 5 people, and obviously we've got to replace them. But my goal is to build around the players that we have. And so we're going to go out there and we're going to look for depth, just like we did when we do every year.
The Temple Owls went from dominance to disaster in Fort Worth, Texas in about 24 hours.
Courts in Session beat reporter Brielle Batchelor is at the Liacouras Center to break down the Owls' season-ending trip to Texas. Hey, Brielle.
Thanks, guys. The loss stings for so many reasons. The Owls lost a rematch from last year's semifinal game against Rice. Temple was the higher seed. And this is the 11th year with the Owls in the American Conference without them winning a semifinal game.
It all started well enough for the women's basketball team down in Texas. The Temple women's basketball team started off the championship strong with a 65-34 win against Charlotte in the quarterfinals.
They're going to let the player of the game and Oliver slap that thing on.
And all seemed well heading into the semifinal.
We want to pride ourselves on our defense, and so we spend time on that in practice. The good thing about our defense is it's team defense.
But this optimism was short-lived when Temple faced Rice in the semifinals. For the second straight year, Temple came in as the higher seed, and for the second straight year, they were knocked out.
Since joining the American Athletic Conference in the 2013 to 2014 season, the Temple women's basketball team has yet to win a semifinal game.
I am sad that they didn't get it. I'm sad that our seniors didn't go out with us playing for a championship.
Sophomore forward Jaleesa Molina is one of the few leaders eligible to return next year, and if she does, she will hold the leadership role.
I have to show my new teammates that we're not doing this again next year, and I don't want to do this again.
Heading into their next season, the Owls will be down 5 players thanks to graduation. That means, once again, Diane Richardson has her work cut out for her in this offseason.
The difference between Temple's quarterfinal game and the semifinal game is jarring. Temple won by 31 against Charlotte. They were all over the boards, shot well, defended well, but they did not rebound well, but also in steals where Temple had the edge in 13-6. In the semifinal loss, the Owls were on the opposite end of the loss. Temple really struggled from the field with its rebounds way down and its turnovers way up. The women's team will look very different come next season. They will most likely bring in many players from the transfer portal. Players like Jaleesa Molina, Kayla Turner, and Tristan Taylor are a few that Richardson hopes remains on the team. Reporting live from the Leah Core Center, I'm Brielle Batchelor. Guys, back to you in the TV3 studio.
Thanks, Brielle. Let's start in the quarterfinals where Temple dominated number 12 Charlotte by 31 points. This is where Temple set a rebounding record with 56. The team had truckloads of momentum heading into the semi-finals against the other flock of Owls in Rice, but they fell flat 67-49 as the Rice Owls headed to the finals.
On the other side of the bracket, number 7 ECU met its match in 2-seeded North Texas. The Mean Green moved on to the semifinals, ready to take on the winner of 3 South Florida and 6 Tulane. A 10-point win by USF set up a battle between South Florida and North Texas, with the Bulls coming out victorious. Awaiting the number 3 seed Bulls were the number 9 seed defending champion Rice Owls, looking for a second straight conference title, but USF had other plans. Claiming the crown as AAC champs and clinching a tournament bid as the only AAC team to go dancing. But it's time to take another break. On the other side, we're joined by WHIP's Tyler Blankenship, who saw all the action down in Fort Worth.
Don't go anywhere, Courts in Session is back in just 90 seconds. Welcome back. We're now joined by Tyler Blankenship, broadcaster and analyst for WHIP Radio. He made the trip to Texas last week, and now he's made the shorter trip to the TV3 studio to talk all things hoops. Thanks for coming in, Tyler.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
So, Tyler, we'll start off with the men's team. They came out hot in the first half against Tulsa, 8 assists in that frame alone. What went wrong in the second half?
Well, like you mentioned, 8 assists in the first half. It looked like the ball movement was going really well for them, but it was only 4 assists in the second half. And you got to give credit to the Tulsa defense, really. They really started to trap the point guard when it was Zion Stanford bringing the ball up. They would trap him near half court, try to get the ball out of his hands early. So they had to make a decision early. When you get to the ball to your forwards, people aren't used to handling the ball like that. The ball movement kind of slowed down, and they weren't able to make as quick decisions and get to the basket as well.
Yeah, and the men improved this year. They finished under 500 with more wins. But is this team in a better spot heading into the offseason than they were last year? You look at the people they're graduating, both Steve Settle, Shane Dezzoni, and Jamal Mashburn Jr. Where do they go from here?
It's hard to tell. I mean, first things first, like Coach Fisher even said this after the game, that it's all about retaining your people first, especially in the portal era. You have to retain, and you're kind of recruiting your own people, and then after that, you're recruiting others to come in as well. But you're going to look for younger guys such as Stanford to continue to develop and contribute, go along, maybe Babu Duradola. You got to look for those younger guys to step up and really kind of contribute in ways that they hadn't before.
And one last question. If you had to pick one young guy to step up for next year, who would it be?
I think it definitely would be Stanford. I think you saw with it when Jamal Mashburn Jr. was out with his injury, Stanford really stepped up. You saw his numbers go up across the board. And he talked about after the game that he does think he has that responsibility going into next season.
Yeah. Well, let's move away from the men and look towards the women. Now, we normally see them thrive in the third quarter coming out of the locker room, but they lost the third to Rice 16-8. What do you think happened there?
Well, again, it was Rice's defense did a great job of fronting the Temple offensive players. They were not letting them make the cuts, and it was the drives that Temple kept attempting in. It was Susie Angola fact, the Rice center. She was really stopping everything. She came in with 3 blocks in this game. Rice had 8 blocks total, and it was a turnover to Temple that really stopped them as well. And that defense really turned into offense for Rice consistently with Fisher and Alexis getting easy transition buckets throughout the entire game.
Yeah. And so we talked about the men's graduating players. What about Gary and East? Who do you think will replace them? How do you replace them?
Well, I am more hopeful with the women's team going forward into the next season because you do have players such as Savannah Curry, Tristan Taylor, Kayla Turner, who can all step up for you, and Julissa Molina, I think, will have a big role going into next season. We saw her numbers go up this season. She was really impressive on offense and defense. You would see her as a forward really do a lot at the point of attack on defense and create those transition buckets, which you don't always a lot of times see from players in her position. So I think when you have players like that, I mean, you have Turner, who got 6th Person of the Year, Savannah Curry, who was on the all-freshman team. So you have those pieces going forward. You bring in a few more, and then with Coach Richardson, you can always be confident in her developing her players.
Yeah, exactly. It's an exciting future to come. But Tyler, thanks for joining us. We appreciate the knowledge.
Thank you. Always down to talk hoops.
Well, now that the regular season and the conference postseason tournaments are done, we wanted to take a look at those who shined on the men's and women's sides.
Yes, Pat, when we return, we'll be taking a look at the MVPs of the American Conference Tournament. It was an exciting week of basketball. Courts in Session is back in 90. Welcome back. We've got 2 MVPs from the American Conference Tournament, one from each side of the ball. On the men's side, we've got who other than Memphis guard P.J. Haggerty. And for the women, we've got South Florida's forward Carla Brito. P.J. Haggerty was the expected pick heading into the tournament, and for good reason. He dropped 83 points, 11 assists, and 6 blocks throughout the tournament. In the final matchup against UAB, he scored 23 points and pulled down 7 rebounds. His team managed the expectations they've had all year and are now going dancing as a 5 seed in the West. On the women's side, South Florida forward Carla Brito is going to take the Standout Award. In 3 tournament games, Brito had 43 points, 4 assists, and 5 steals. In her last matchup of the tournament against Rice, Brito had 17 points and 9 rebounds. The Bulls are also going dancing as a 12 seed in the upcoming tournament. That's a wrap on the American Conference Tournament performances. Make sure to keep an eye out during the March Madness Tournament for these teams as they go on to represent the American Conference and basketball's biggest spectacle. Gabriel and Pat, back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, Xavier. Though this is our final Courts in Session for 2025, but our basketball coverage doesn't stop here.
Earlier this season, we're sure you remember Temple's historic win number 2000. This puts the Owls in a very exclusive club.
So we decided to take a look at this history-making men's program with a 30-minute special. We're calling it Built on Broad, 2000 wins and counting. Here's a sneak peek.
I mean, you can't talk about Philadelphia without talking about Temple basketball.
We don't have to create history. It's not our job. Our job is to continue the legacy.
I believe in the mission of Temple. I think it's extraordinarily important for Philadelphia.
Again, check us out next week at this time for a special Owl Sports Update production, hosted by our own Natalie Correnda. That wraps things up for our final show of the semester, covering hoops with my co-anchor Pat. Has been nothing but fun. Also, a huge thank you to our producers Sam Massad and Logan Matthews, who have been nothing short of amazing, as well as our 2 beat reporters Xavier Adams and Brielle Batchelor, and not to mention our incredible photogs Anthony Rossioli, Domingo Dominguez, and Sheldon Harvey.
And finally, a huge thank you to Matt Fine, #TrustTheFine, for giving us all the opportunity to cover Temple basketball. And if we're lucky, we might even be able to get to do it next year. But until then, thanks for tuning in.